Welcome to episode 6 of the interview series, a series where we interview different people from different professions in order to inspire young people who might want to pursue these careers. Today, I am joined by Arminder Singh Dhillon, who's a young entrepreneur who has a business called Boot Buddy. So how are you today, Arminder?
I'm good, not too bad. Just been very busy this morning.
Right. Thank you for coming on. So before we get into the talk about Boot Buddy, just tell everyone a bit more about yourself.
Well, let me start by saying thank you for having me. Um, as you know, my name is Arminder Singh Dhillon, and I invented a product called the Boot Buddy. So the Boot Buddy is a product that's used to clean any type of muddy footwear, and it was invented by myself at the age of 11. Now, at the age of 19, I have built the business up with my brother, and we've gone through different stages of, creating a product, going through different types of manufacturing, even going into Dragon's Den and securing backing from Tuka Suleiman, Peter Jones, and Deborah Meaden. And we are currently now looking at new strategies to break into different markets.
Wow, that sounds like a brilliant journey. And of course, we'll be getting into that later in the interview. So let's start from the beginning. How did the idea of Boot Buddy come to be?
So I used to play a lot of football when I was younger, and I had this problem where you would train twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, and it would be on grass, especially in winter. The grass is always going to be wet. It's always going to be very muddy. And once your boots get caked on, it's always a challenge to keep them clean for the next training session. So I would get into the habit of just never cleaning my boots. So then you can imagine with the 2 to 3 times a week training and then a game on the Sunday, your boots would always stay filthy. So I thought, okay, well, it does impact your performance on the pitch, because when you don't have clean boots, your boots actually gain a little bit of weight from the mud, but also the studs can't do a proper job in giving you grip into the grass. So I kind of thought, well, what do you need to clean boots? So the idea of Boot Buddy stems around a brush to scrub the boots clean, the water to help wash and rinse the mud away, and the scraper on the rear of the Boot Buddy to help remove large clumps of mud.
Well, it sounds like a very intuitive way of cleaning shoes. I understand the frustrations of people having to bang their football boots together and things, and people spend a long time. I know a lot of people who do play football and do have these frustrations who would pretty much benefit greatly from your product. So obviously you took this idea, you built up a successful business. At what point in this journey did you decide that you had to go on Dragon's Den?
To be honest with you, it wasn't something that we had initially set out to do. So the whole idea of Dragon's Den actually was only raised to us when other people kept on saying, why don't you go onto the Den? Why don't you try and pitch? Why don't you get that kind of exposure? And we never really took it seriously, to be honest with you. Initially, we used to hear it all the time, sometimes daily, if not definitely weekly. And then at one point, we just thought, okay, well, there's no harm in putting forward an application. And so the process of the Den is not something that happens within the space of a year in terms of you sending an application and getting onto the Den and pitching and everything like that. Well, for us, definitely, it wasn't that short. So the idea was, my brother and I thought, okay, well, why don't we just put through an application, see what happens, and just take it from there? And once we put in the first application, it was quite a shock, because we didn't hear from anyone until 6 months later. So by 6 months, you'd already forgotten that you've sent an application off. And we went into the White City studios at the time to meet the lady who had picked up our application. And she said, well, now that I've met you guys and I've done a little bit of a background check, I feel confident to put you in front of the producers. So we said, okay, that's not too bad. So we did a short filmed mini pitch, I guess you could say. And the producers watched this pitch. And off that pitch, they decide whether you'd be a good enough candidate to go into the Den. So we didn't even hear back from them until maybe, I want to say, a month or something like this. And so after that month had passed, we were told, right, congratulations, we think you're suitable enough to go into the den. This is what you need to do. This is how you need to prepare, etc. But they said, whatever you do, you need to be free from this month to that month. So it was a span of like 3 months. I'm like, okay, that's quite weird. And then we were just kept in the dark until about, I think, 2 or 3 weeks in advance. We were told, right, your pitch time and your pitch slot is this day at that time. You need to be there. If you're not there, you won't get a second chance. And that was it.
In terms of you being in the den with the actual dragons, the whole experience, how was it?
I mean, it's an unusual experience, mainly because at the end of the day, it's still a business pitch, so it's familiar in that sense. But I guess the side of it, which isn't that familiar, especially to someone like myself who's never really been on camera before that, was the fact that towards the left-hand side, there's about 50 members of the BBC crew, all with lights, all with cameras pointed directly at you. So it kind of intensifies that stress you have, because you think, okay, well, it's already stressful because it's a business pitch, but then to realize that there's always cameras being pointed at you, and all these shining lights beaming right directly down into your face, it does kind of make it a lot more intense.
A question that a lot of people tend to have about the show Dragon's Den is how long you are actually in there for, because people seem to say, well, how much they actually edited down. Can you say, how long you were in there with the whole thing? Is it edited down that much, or do they keep it near enough to what?
So in our case, it was definitely nowhere near 10 minutes. It was way, way longer than that. I think it was bordering 2 hours, something along those lines, because at the end of the day, there are a lot of business questions that get asked, and the whole purpose of Dragon's Den is it's meant to be entertainment. So it makes sense why it gets edited down, because the majority of the people watching the show, they kind of want to see the ludicrous numbers, or the ridiculous projections, or kind of the outrageous ideas, things like that. They don't really care about the business doing, oh, did it hit its year one targets? Did it do this? Did it do that? What's its turnover? Well, they would care about that, but in terms of the actual nitty gritty financial stuff, it doesn't really make for great TV, which is, it makes sense, to be honest with you.
So you obviously spent the 2 hours in there, and you finally got backing from 3 dragons, which is not something a lot of entrepreneurs can claim. How did that feel to get that backing from 3 very important business people?
I mean, it was quite odd, because at first it didn't seem, it was quite surreal, because at first when we'd gone into the den, we had already had quite a long day, to be honest with you. So it wasn't like the ideal scenario that we were pitching in. We being my brother, my mum, and myself, we were quite tired. We'd practiced this pitch beforehand, like numerous amounts of times, and we'd gone in there, and you don't really know how well it's going, because obviously with the dragons you'll see a lot that they'll say certain things like, oh, well, I don't think the business can do that. I don't, but because the reason why they try to, not cut deep, but criticize definitely, is to see the personality and the character of the person pitching. Because I feel like for them, if you don't show that you're dedicated to your business and your product, they're not willing to invest in you. So that's why mainly it felt quite surreal, because once we'd got the backing, I just thought, oh, well, this doesn't seem normal. This seems quite odd. And then eventually it kind of sunk in that those were our new business partners. So I guess at first it felt quite weird, but after a little while you kind of get used to it, and you think, oh, wow, actually that's the norm now. This is who we work with. This is what we can do together. And it's quite exciting.
Well, thank you for sharing that experience. And as myself, who's an avid watcher of Dragon's Den, I find it fascinating to hear, like, from your perspective, what goes on and how it feels. But if I can return to the business itself, in terms of your involvement in the business, what would you say are the biggest challenges associated with operating and maintaining a business such as Boot Buddy?
Well, I guess because it's an e-commerce business, there's definitely challenges in how you kind of distribute your product. So, of course, we do sell into some retailers, but I guess a difficult factor of any e-commerce business is if you have too many distribution channels for your products. So, say if you go on to, I don't know, a retailer's website, Amazon, your own website, eBay, other different places. Unless you can keep an eye on everything and make sure that the product is not being slashed by a certain retailer to devalue your product, to make sure that you're gaining the most attraction from your own adverts or customers rather than going to the adverts that you've paid for. Don't just go straight to Amazon or straight to eBay. They actually come to yourself, making it more profitable. That's a kind of difficult aspect of the business because you're constantly having to monitor things like your impressions and what your kind of CPA is. So like cost per acquisition, how that's working out, if your adverts are actually making sense, if consumers actually know what the product does. So those are the kind of main challenges I would say we've had. But initially, it was 100% manufacturing because the Boot Buddy was a brand new idea that had never been developed or kind of thought of before.
In terms of the current situation with, of course, the pandemic, has that had any big impact on Boot Buddy and its operations?
I think because the Boot Buddy is something that's centered around sports, the pandemic has had an impact. With the fact that the football season for kids, for adults, for anyone who plays any type of sports, so rugby, football, those kind of grassy sports, because their season was called quite short, to quite an abrupt end. We noticed that because people were playing less outside, they weren't getting muddy, so then there was a kind of loss in the need, I guess you could say, for the Boot Buddy. However, we have managed to negate this by developing our sneaker range so that, as people have been doing their quarantine walks and, their quarantine exercise, it's inevitable that the shoes will get scuffed, that they will get dirty, that they will get somewhat muddy. Not so much as if they were playing a sport, but there is noticeable amounts of dirt on your shoes. And we've developed a whole range to kind of combat this problem. So that's how we've negated that.
So, of course, as the things get slowly back to normal and as we start looking towards the future, what next for Boot Buddy? How do you envision this business in a few years' time?
Definitely with a few more products. I mean, we've got a couple of variations that we're working on. They're currently going through the R&D phases. And I guess opening up different markets. So the next one for us, we're not too sure yet because there's still a lot of work to be done in our existing markets that we sell into, for example, the UK. We reckon that there's some stuff that we can do extra. But yeah, definitely looking at new markets and developing potentially new products. But again, that's not 100%.
Are there any plans that you have perhaps that you want to achieve that might be independent of Boot Buddy, or is it all going to be based on the business itself?
There are definitely plans to kind of grow Boot Buddy further. However, there are definitely another set of plans independent of Boot Buddy. So currently I've just finished first year university. So once I finish university, I'll go full time into businesses that I've set up. But at the moment, I'm definitely looking to set up another business, which is a kind of watch brand. So I do have a kind of passion for watches. Amongst that, a couple of other businesses that I've looked at setting up. So I guess it's just kind of diversifying and going into different, sectors.
Well, I think that's great, and I obviously wish you all the best of luck for the business and, of course, your plans as well. Now, I speak to a lot of young people who do have their own unique ideas, and they're always thinking, well, should they want to share it to the world, they want to turn it into their own successful business. What advice do you have for these young people?
Well, I'd say if it's an idea like I had where it had never been created before, and you want to show it to people, the simplest way you can do that kind of stuff is if you go on to, it's going to sound really elementary, but Google. I mean, if you Google local manufacturers, you know, people who sell stuff to help make your product, those kind of things, and even a basic non-disclosure document. Because when you talk to people, although some people will say, "Oh, my word is enough," these kind of things, you can never be too sure. So I guess having that kind of security is a good place to start, especially as a young person, because when you're young, you haven't had the chance to experience as many things as someone who's got a couple of years on you, which is one thing I've definitely learned in business, that you know, you can't take someone's age for granted. Yes, someone might be extremely young and knowledgeable, but they could be a lot sharper than someone 2 or 3 times older than them, and it could be the other way around as well. Someone older could be a lot sharper, so you kind of just have to negate those kind of pitfalls, I guess. But I think the main thing is not to shy away. I know what I've said kind of makes business seem like a murky kind of place and a bit dangerous, but to be honest with you, it's not like that. Most people are very honest and they will help you and, you know, get you where you need to be. However, I will say, just don't shy away from what you want to do. If you have an idea or you have a business that you want to start, the best way of starting it is to just go full pelt into the idea, and make sure that you are 100% behind your own business and brand. Because if it's a case of, well, I want to start something but I'm not 100% vested into it, then it's not worth your time, because it's something that you have to constantly be a part of, something you have to breathe, something you have to, you know, constantly be working on 24/7.
Well, yeah, thank you for that. And I'm pretty sure a lot of young people will benefit greatly from all the things you've shared, not just the advice, but of course, hearing your experiences and your journey through Boot Buddy and, of course, other things as well. Once again, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time to come on and have this discussion. And to all those who are
Thank you
watching,
very much for having me.
you're welcome. And all those who are watching, make sure to, of course, check out Boot Buddy on their website and on their Instagram page as well. And of course, you can continue to follow my own socials as well. So once again, thank you very much. Thank you, Arminder. And I'll see everyone in the next episode. Goodbye.